Let's get ready for the Super Bowl next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers here with Sia Najad from the FFT DFS podcast. And Sia, it's our last chance to play some fantasy football for 2022 NFL season. I know it's well into 2023 by now, but yeah, the Super Bowl this Sunday, Philadelphia versus Kansas City. And it's a one-game slate. And I guess that's where we're going to start this discussion is when you're talking about DFS. How do you go about these one-game showdown kind of slates? How does that change the way you play DFS?
Yeah, it changes a little bit because you don't rely just on projections. You're going to rely more on game script than anything. So a couple things to consider. You know, everybody's going to like Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes and all those guys. You want to try to find ways to get unique, but also follow a game script that you think is realistic in your mind. It doesn't have to be the most common game script. In fact, it probably should be an uncommon game script, but you want to make sure your lineups are correlated. For example, like Patrick Mahomes with 2 pass catchers. For sure. On the Jalen Hurts side, maybe you don't want 2 pass catchers because you think he might be running in 1 or 2. So things like that, things have to sort of make sense in terms of what you think the outcome is going to be. But that's pretty much it. You know, follow a game script, try to be a little bit unique, and be willing to take chances. Certainly on a one-game slate, there's only so many players in your pool. You got to take chances.
Yeah. Are you willing to throw DSTs or kickers in your lineups in these kind of slates?
I am. In this case, I probably won't. If I'm making 20 lineups, I probably sneak the Eagles defense in there just because maybe things kind of fall off, you know, for Mahomes with the ankle and things of that nature. I might throw in a Harrison Butker or Elliott, but I'm really going to be more on the skill position players because we have such a high total. I think that high total of 51 is probably pretty efficient. So I'm expecting, especially these teams that go for it a lot on 4th down, I'm expecting the kickers and defenses to be phased out just a bit.
I will point out, just because I'm a negative sort, that 4 straight Super Bowls have hit the under. 56% of games in the 2022 NFL season also hit the under. I think, generally speaking, when you're talking about prop bets and stuff like that, the over probably gets picked a little bit too often. I think that's my sense of things anyway. And so, you know, it's possible we have a little bit more of a low-scoring game than that very high 51-point over-under would suggest, but I'm not saying you should act on that because, hey, that 51-point total, like you said, it's probably pretty reasonable. How are you attacking? You know, one of the fun things about these showdown slates is you get that captain or MVP spot on FanDuel or DraftKings where you get 1.5 times points, and that can be the differentiator. So what's your approach when you're figuring out who to put in that captain or MVP spot?
Yeah, I think a good way to do it is to put in the captain and just see what, like a lot of times you want to have an efficient, like a price efficient captain, like a Dallas Goedert, for example. And then you say to yourself, okay, if I have Dallas Goedert as my captain, listen, everybody's going to play Jalen Hurts or Mahomes or Kelsey. I get that, but those are really high price guys. So go ahead and play those guys, but you want to see what you can get with your lineup with your captain. So in the Dallas Goedert example, well, I can probably fit in because he's pretty cheap. He's 6,400 in the captain spot on DraftKings. He'll be a little bit more, but I can fit in there Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. I can also fit in Travis Kelce and a couple lower end guys. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I can kind of create a game script from that. Maybe I would create the game script first. Maybe I create my price efficient captain first. Either way, it certainly has to make sense with itself.
What kind of game script are you expecting in this one?
So, I mean, I think there's room for various game scripts naturally, but I think you might be right about the under, but I do think it's going to be a competitive game. So I do think we're going to have some back and forth from a scoring standpoint. The question you have to ask yourself is, if you believe that, where's the scoring come from? Who is it going to? So again, naturally, you're going to want to have Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts in most of your lineups. You might want to have Travis Kelce in there in most of your lineups, but maybe you don't. Maybe you take a contrarian view that we're going to have the Juju Smith-Schuster game from, I think it was week 13 and week 14, where he caught 10 of 10 balls and 9 of 11. You know, he's healthy. Kadarius Toney is healthy. So there are scenarios where you say, I'm going to take these 2 really popular quarterbacks, but you know what? I'm not going to pay up for Travis Kelce. I'm going to think, well, maybe the Eagles try to neutralize him, and they you know, the single coverage with these elite outside defensive backs, and maybe Juju gets loose, particularly in the short area, and gobbles up a bunch of catches. So I think there's room to like leave out an elite guy. Maybe you think Miles Sanders isn't going to have the day that some people think, so you leave out the running back and you go with a low end wide receiver there. So those are some of the mental progressions you go through.
Yeah, Sanders is an interesting one. His rushing yards prop has crept up as the week's gone on. I think it opened at like 58.5. It's up to around 60 now. So that's an interesting one. Like you said, a lot of people expecting a pretty good game from him. Let's get down to some of the brass tacks before we go, and just give me some of the players who, if you're playing 20 lineups, are going to be in most of them.
Yeah, I like Dallas Goedert a lot. I like Devontae Smith a lot. Maybe you don't play them both in the same lineup, but I do like them. AJ Brown, I like, just not quite as much as those guys. I think Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts are going to be in most of my lineups, so those are two high-end spots. I'll play a little bit of Travis Kelce, but I think I'm willing to fade him and just take the high risk of fading Kelce and maybe grabbing a low-price Kadarius Toney, Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, I mentioned I like Devontae Smith. That's pretty much it. As far as the low-end guys, I don't think I'm paying for MVS. I think Quez Watkins might make it into my lineup. A guy like Zach Pascal, who's only 800 on DraftKings, just as a kind of a throwaway. If the game script is right, maybe he gets in the game, especially in a negative game script for the Eagles. So there's opportunity to get some of those lower-end guys in there. But the cream of the crop, it's Goddard, it's Mahomes, it's Devontae Smith, it's Jalen Hurts. Juju is going to make it into a lot of lineups, and Toney is pretty price economical.
All right. I guess the last question, who wins and what's the final score?
Yeah, we just did this on the FFT DFS podcast. I believe Mike McClure had 27-24 Chiefs, and I'm on the Eagles end, and I gave this out. I think it was 30-23 was going to be my score prediction, and the Chiefs, the Eagles win that one.
I'm going to go 24-20 Chiefs. I think they're the better team. I think the under hits, but I've been wrong plenty this season, so we can go one more time for the Super Bowl. I'll be wrong. And that's going to do it for the FFT in 5 podcast for the Super Bowl. Make sure you subscribe to the FFT DFS podcast. They'll be there all season next year for you, making sure you get the best lineup set for your DFS contents. And we'll see you next season.
I can't wait. It's very bittersweet with this Super Bowl, but I can't wait.
It's a little sad. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Chris.